Okay, so welcome to Chat Communications Happenings and Trends. So on Friday, thousands of Palestinians started a planned 6-week protest about Israel's 7 decades of colonialism called the Great March of Return. So as of Monday, 18 Palestinians are dead and over 1,400 have been injured after Israeli snipers opened fire on these protesters, so making this the bloodiest incident in Gaza in years. And just to clarify, the UN numbers as of this past weekend, the official numbers are about 15 dead and still 1,400 wounded. Now, 20 were said to be in critical condition, but it appears that subsequently some of these that were in critical condition have died, thus bringing the number to 18. So the Israeli military claimed that it was actually not a protest so much as a violent riot. And so that's why they fired on only on these main instigators. Okay, so a spokesperson for the army claimed excessive force was not used, and the numbers of injured are grossly exaggerated. They said that they only acted when any attempts were made to weaken the fence. So the IDF stated in a tweet that was later removed that yesterday we saw 30,000 people. We arrived prepared and with precise reinforcements. Nothing was carried out uncontrolled. Everything was accurate and measured, and we know where every bullet landed, which is bullshit, but continuing. So the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for an independent investigation on Friday evening. And so as of Saturday morning, our political leaders remained quite silent about this issue. The first acknowledgement of these atrocities finally came from Senator Bernie Sanders in this tweet where he stated, "The killing of Palestinian demonstrators by Israeli forces in Gaza is tragic. It is the right of all people to protest for a better future without a violent response." So the 6 weeks protest is expected to continue until May 15th. It is to commemorate the 700,000 Palestinians that either fled or were forced to leave their homes in the creation of Israel in 1948. There are 6 main protest sites, and thousands of Palestinians made way to them, including children, since the protests were advertised as being peaceful. I saw a tweet saying that, well, this is, what was it? It was trying to basically polarize this issue against Democrat and Republican. And it pissed me off because, one, it succeeded. And so it basically said something to the effect of, the Democrats used to stand with Israel no matter what. And now they've, abandoned Israel. And they showed Senator Sanders' tweet about these atrocities. And also that it wasn't considered a wrongdoing. Like in the same tweet, it wasn't considered a wrongdoing, considering that it was an invasion of people into their homeland, into Israel's homeland. And I swear to God, right underneath the tweet is, and it had like the most likes, is, well, Bernie Sanders isn't a Democrat.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. So basically you have centrists coming on and hand waving the issue of people being murdered in a genocide by an aggressive authoritarian state. And instead of sticking to that and to how bonkers it was for this person to tweet this, they decided to harp on the issue of Bernie Sanders not being a Democrat. And then in subsequent replies, there was nothing related to that tweet. It was just how Bernie Sanders, stole the vote from Clinton, and then you got Sanders supporters that jumped in and started arguing with these people about that issue. I'm like, wait, what happened to the Palestinians being murdered here? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it was successful, but it wasn't a GOP versus Dem. It was progressives versus liberals or centrists or whatever the fuck they call themselves. So in a way, it was effective in doing this kind of like X versus Y, but was against the people that should technically be on the same team, but will never be on the same team for good reason. They shouldn't be. Anyways, Janet, do you have any subsequent thoughts about the actual issue? Because it's a horrendous act, and the fact that none of our politicians have been brave or courageous enough to speak out is grotesque. It's absolutely grotesque.
Oh, I completely agree there. So anyhow, they were shot on their own land. They weren't in Israel when they got shot. They were in Gaza. They were in their own land. They were going up to the fence. People, it doesn't make, and the whole thing with Hamas, like trying to equate them all to being Hamas is just, I don't know. Like that, I just feel like as a person myself, if I'm in a protest, yes, I try, you're going to try to get up to the line. You're going to try to make a point like this is their line. There was even, I read somewhere in one point, Israel was actually in their land like 300 to 500 meters.
Yeah.
And they were shooting them in that land that was 300 to 500 meters of their
And
own land.
what about the people that were trying to prevent medics from getting these guys to care? I literally watched a video of a soldier. Basically, the medics came in, grabbed the person, put them on a stretcher, and was starting to carry them off, and the soldier grabbed the handle and pulled them back so that they couldn't receive care or treatment. Was preventing the medics from doing their job. And this was well away from a fence. I didn't see any fence around them. Like, the medics were in Gaza.
Yeah.
So, and when does basically bumping a fucking fence mean that you get to get executed?
Exactly.
Like, does nobody make sense of that? Like, oh, I touched a fence. I should be executed now for touching a fucking fence. I mean, come on.
What if they put their foot over into the land? You're going to get executed for just trespassing? Like you're going to get shot at for trespassing? And on that video, if you watched from the beginning, there was a little female medic at first, and one of them, she's trying to treat the guy before they got him on the gurney, and one of them points a gun at her. She's a medic. She's a tiny little medic trying to do her job, and they're harassing them. And I always thought that was part of like wartime civility, whatever that means. But I mean, I thought you allow the others to get, their sick and wounded off. Granted, I guess it wasn't really a war, but yeah, it's the same.
Well, that's the other justification is it's not a war crime because they're not at war. I've seen that justification too, which is whatever it is, it's a fucking crime and they should be penalized for it. We need to stop supporting this authoritarian, violent regime. I mean, we once again, the United States fucked shit up, right? Once again, they went into a territory that wasn't theirs and occupied it, which is essentially what they did. They made Israel there. The Palestinians were forced out of their homes and their land that they owned with nothing in return. They were just told, well, this is fucking happening. They were forced to do this. And I'm glad that like these Jews that were being persecuted were able to find some sanctuary. But what I'm not okay with is that it was forced upon someone else and that someone else owned this land that they had no right to. And the only justification that we have is because the Bible, right? And we're supposed to be a separation from church and state, but we established an entire homeland because the Bible said so. Like, who the fuck are we? Are the United States are fucking acting as God now? I mean, okay, so we're responsible for that. We're also responsible for weaponizing the state. Where did they get those weapons from? The United States. The United States pays for their defense.
And
So one
even
thing that we could do as a nation to help prevent these atrocities from happening or deter them is stop funding them. Stop saying, you will not get defense funding because of this. They need to be penalized, and we need to be the ones to do it because we're funding this. And it's not fucking like racist to say this. It's not fucking racist to point out an authoritarian regime that is attacking and committing a genocide against another people. This has nothing to do with them being Jews. Absolutely not. It has everything to do with the atrocities that they are conducting. Just like it had nothing to do with the Nazis being Christian.
Mhm.
That's secondary to the problem. The problem was that they were horrific people and prejudiced,
Mhm.
and that they committed a genocide against a whole people based off of their religion, which is what is happening to the Palestinians.
But I mean, there's so many lies that they're trying to put out too, and I mean, they do the disinformation like any other time, and they want to equate all Palestinians to Hamas, which is not nearly close at all. That's like saying that every Iraqi is ISIS or something. I mean, that's just wrong. I mean, you can't
Mind
do that.
explaining? Do you mind explaining to our viewers Hamas and like who they are and why they're trying to do that?
Well, I mean, Hamas would be like I mean the equivalent of a terror group. I mean, it'd be like ISIS in that region.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, they have killed Palestinians too. I mean, they're just a terror group. That's what they are. And so saying that every Palestinian is part of this terror group is just as ridiculous as saying that every Arab is part of any other terror group. It's ridiculous.
And I mean, yeah, they were there to protest peacefully. If they were part of a terrorist group, they would fucking have weapons. They would be armed. None of them were armed. So I mean, propaganda is very powerful. It's a very powerful tool to utilize, and every country does it. We do it in the United States, not we personally, but it happens in the United States. The mainstream media does it. I was just talking about like how income inequality is so bad that 80% of the country now is projected to be in third world country conditions. It was updated since I last said 40%. Apparently, it's 80%, and only 20% really enjoy kind of these better education opportunities, better jobs that actually pay for said education that they went through. Only 20% of the country enjoys that, enjoys job security, enjoys being debt free. Um, which is remarkable. And the fact that our mainstream media won't report the facts on this, they're hiding this stuff. I mean, and it's just to control the population, right? Because if 80% of the population realize this, and we're angry about it, I mean, there would be an uprising. People would fight back. I would hope that they would. But they don't, because they don't know, because our mainstream media is doing such a disservice. And our mainstream media isn't really covering this story either. I mean, when you were looking for information on this, you had to probably go out of the United States, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I mean, yeah, the Guardian's been doing a lot. I mean, so
The
a lot
Guardian
of it,
from the UK.
yeah. So a lot of it was the Guardian. I saw some news reports from like Ireland, and then some, you know, Al Jazeera, and I mean, not Al Jazeera, but that, the that some that are reporting from the area,
Right.
and that that was about it. I mean, otherwise, it was just like quick clips of, oh, this is what happened, and or in some of them, using the Israeli talking points too, you know of it being Hamas doing this, or that this was planned by Hamas. which it wasn't. And that, I mean, like, so that day, the March 30th is Land Day for the Palestinians. 1976 is when 6 people were shot trying to protect their land or something in Palestine from the Israelis. And in 1976, 6 people were shot and 100 wounded at that point. So this is the anniversary of that too. That's why they chose that date to start the 6 weeks, to bring it to the date of when, Israel was formed 70 years ago. So they were going to do this whole protest for 6 weeks, um, just to commemorate everything they've gone through, which
Right.
they have every right to do. And they're doing it on their own fucking land.
Right. Which will remind everybody, the land beyond that fence used to be their fucking land too. Just saying, just throwing that out there. I know people hate saying that or hate listening to that, but it's true. I mean, it was stolen from them. It's like how not we, but how, European settlers came in and stole Native American land away from the Native Americans. It's the same thing.
I have to say, watching some of the videos of the protesters, it totally reminded me of, Standing Rock and what was happening there. But you know, this is prior to anyone getting shot and stuff. But I mean, yeah, I mean, were people throwing rocks? Were people rolling tires on fire? There's very little. I didn't see a lot of that, but I saw, some here and there. And but they're still on their own land,
Right.
and they're not going to bring down an
And we have to
Israeli
question
sniper with a rock. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
some of those things we have to actually call into question, right? Because remember, the Israelis, they're great at propagandizing events, especially to meet their narrative of them being the victims. So was that a real, like, legitimate video of these tires burning? I have no idea, but it does call into question some of these things. And sure, maybe. I mean, not everybody in a protest is going to be completely docile either. But I mean, there is anger, and legitimately so. That anger will manifest in a certain way. But these guys were not armed. A rolling tire that's on fire is not a violent threat. It's bad for the environment, sure, because it's, burning off that rubber into the atmosphere. But generally speaking, it is not just, if it rolls toward you, just step to the side. It's not really that hard to, you know, escape, I would argue. I
Also,
could
if they
escape.
stayed behind their fence, it wouldn't even. It might have gone up to the fence, but I mean, it's not going to immediately set the fence on fire.
No,
And I
God,
mean,
no.
if
No.
and obviously the Israelis were not staying over on their side of the fence. I mean, maybe that's why a rock was being thrown at them if they were coming over on, into Gaza's land, because we saw the video. We
I
saw the
mean,
video of the soldiers being on
and
their land.
and people throwing rocks to me is indicative of the fact that these guys were not prepared to be armed. They just took what they had. And were they throwing rocks before or after the shooting started?
Don't know.
That's a question.
No.
I mean, yeah, I would do whatever I could to defend myself or to help these medics that were trying to get people back, and if throwing rocks was the only way they could get assure that the medic could get through, then fucking throw rocks. But that is indicative of the fact that they were not armed. They were there to be peaceful. Um, I would say that if they were planning to not be peaceful, I would bring something other than a goddamn rock. I would be weaponized to some extent. I would have a knife, if I couldn't get access to a gun, whatever. If I was planning on being being violent, which, I mean, just look at the tools that they use, and you can make a sound, logical judgment on that fact. And so if you liked what you saw, make sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also, please consider making a small donation to our Patreon so that we can continue bringing you content just like this. Thank you.
Perfect.